June 16th, 22nd, 1944. Over in the area of the 2nd Division, the 8th Marines wheeled from facing east to attack northward into the foothills leading to Mount Tapo Chau. The Marine divisions were now facing two major problems. First, their drive north was confronted by General Saito's main line of defense, running west to east across the island. Secondly, the terrain into which the attack had to go was a nightmare of ravines, caves, hills, valleys, and cliffs, all fortified and defended to the death by the Japanese. June 21st brought a respite for the frontline troops. D+6 was enjoyed by all, for a change. We rested on our positions, caught up on sorely needed sleep, got some water, which had been conspicuous by its absence, and even had a good hot meal. For we got our first 10-in-1 rations. Did they ever taste good to our hungry palates, surfeited as they were with K rations? Simultaneously, intensive preparations were made for a coordinated attack by both Marine divisions the next morning. A total of 18 artillery battalions were massed for supporting fire. Combat efficiency was officially rated as very satisfactory, in spite of a sobering total of 6,165 casualties. The following day saw the Marines attack all along the line. The 6th Marines overran parts of Mount Tipo Pali, while the 8th Marines worked its painful way into the maze of ridges and gullies that formed the foothills of Mount Tapo Chau. On the right, the 24th Marines was forced into the messy business of blasting caves honeycombed along Maji Shen Bay. In one of the mortar platoons, a weird encounter took place, as described at the time to this author by the participant, First Lieutenant Joseph J. Cushing. I was bending over one of my mortars, checking the lay of it, when I felt a tap on my shoulder, and a guy asked me, "Hey Mac, are you a Marine?" I turned around, and there was a Jap officer standing about a foot from me. I dropped to the ground, speechless with amazement, and my men riddled the Jap from head to toe. On the left of the 4th Division, the 25th Marines made a major advance of 2,400 yards. The forward lines were now reaching an area where the Kagman Peninsula jutted out to the east. This resulted in a substantially increased frontage that the two Marine divisions could not properly cover. To deal with this, Holland Smith decided to commit his reserve, the 27th Infantry Division, to the center of the line, leaving just one battalion of the 105th Infantry way back in the rear to continue its long, drawn-out attempt to eliminate the Japanese pocket on bypassed Na Futan Point. This day, D+7, was also marked by the arrival of P-47 Thunderbolts of the 19th Fighter Squadron, U.S. Army Air Forces, which landed at Aslito Field. They had been launched from Navy escort carriers. When landed, they were fitted with launching racks for rockets by ground crews who had come in earlier. Later that day, 8 planes took off on their first support mission of the Saipan campaign. Only 2 Marine observation squadrons, VMO-2 and VMO-4, were involved in the battle for Saipan, but they provided invaluable artillery spotting for the 2 Marine divisions. While these developments were taking place in the upper echelons, down in the rock-bottom basic life of infantry platoons, the days of relentless combat pressure were exemplified by their impact on the constant duties and high stress levels on a platoon commander. I made a final inspection of the platoon position and then sacked in, exhausted. When it came my turn to stand watch, it took every last reserve of willpower and strength to get up and go on duty. Then for hours, I alternated between fighting off my sleepiness and sweating out the noises and movements that were all around us. After a while, I spotted a shape, darker than the rest of the surrounding shadows. It was the size of a man's head. I watched it for a long time, nerves on edge, finger on my carbine trigger. Finally, it seemed to move. I fired a shot. Nothing happened. It would have been suicide to go over and investigate. In that darkness and jungle, my own men would have shot me in a second. So when it came time for my relief, I pointed out the suspicious object to the next man, told him to watch it closely, and collapsed into a dead tired sleep. When dawn came on D+8, I was awakened, and the first thing I did was to look over where I'd shot on the night before. There, lying on top of a rock, was the gas mask of one of my men. The owner had been sleeping right beside it. It was a miracle he hadn't been hit. The tremendous strain of the previous night did funny things to your mind. The 10th Marines and the 14th Marines supported the 2nd and 4th Marine Divisions respectively. They had each had a significant reorganization before Saipan. In early spring, the 5th Battalion in each changed its designation. They were redesignated the 2nd and 4th 155mm Artillery Battalions, Corps Artillery, but administratively attached to the 10th and 14th Marines. Thus, the 10th and 14th Marines each contained two 75mm pack howitzer battalions, 1st and 2nd, two 105mm howitzer battalions, 3rd and 4th, and a 155mm artillery battalion, armed with the new M1 155mm howitzers, the first to be received by the Marine Corps in the Pacific. June 23rd through the 30th, 1945. D-Day 8 through D-Day 15. Complications of a serious nature arose in the execution of the battle plan for 23rd June. The battalion of the 105th Infantry still had not cleaned out Na Phu Tan Point. There were semantic and communications differences between the two Smith generals as to orders about who would do what and when. The 106th and 165th Infantry got all tangled up in themselves during a march to take over the center portion of the American lines, and were too late to jump off in the attack, thus delaying the attacks of the Marines. When the Army regiments did move out, they found that the rugged terrain in their sector, and the determined enemy in camouflaged weapons positions in caves of the steep slope leading up to Mount Ta Po Chau, made forward progress slow and difficult. The 27th Infantry Division was stalled. The Corps commander, Holland Smith, was very displeased with this situation. It had started with the difficulties experienced in getting that division ashore. It was exacerbated by the time it was taking to secure Na Phu Tan Point and the mix-up in orders there. Now the advancing Marine divisions were getting infiltration and enfilading fire on their flanks because of the 27th's lack of progress. Accordingly, Lieutenant General Holland Smith met that afternoon with Major General Sanderford Jarman, USA, who was slated to be the island garrison commander, and asked him to press Major General Ralph Smith for much more aggressive action by the 27th. Jarman later stated, "I talked to General Ralph Smith and explained the situation as I saw it, and that I felt from reports from the Corps commander that his division was not carrying its full share. He immediately replied that such was true, that he was in no way satisfied with what his regimental commanders had done during the day, and that he had been with them and had pointed out to them the situation. He further indicated to me that he was going to be present tomorrow, 24th June, with his division when it made its jump off, and he would personally see to it that the division went forward. He appreciated the situation and thanked me for coming to see him and stated that if he didn't take his division forward tomorrow, he should be relieved." This blunt meeting was followed the next morning, D+9, by an even blunter message from Holland Smith to Ralph Smith. "Commanding General is highly displeased with the failure of the 27th Division on June 23rd to launch its attack as ordered at King Hour and the lack of offensive action displayed by the division in its failure to advance and seize Objective 05, when opposed by only small arms and mortar fire. The failure of the 27th to advance in its zone of action resulted in the halting of attacks by the 4th and 2nd Marine Divisions on the flanks of the 27th in order to prevent dangerous exposure of their interior flanks. It is directed that immediate steps be taken to cause the 27th Division to advance and seize the objectives as ordered." These objectives were given dramatic names by the Army regiments: Hell's Pocket, Death Valley, and Purple Heart Ridge. It was certainly true that the terrain was perfect for the dug-in Japanese defenders. Visibility from the slopes of Mount Ta Po Chau and from the ridge gave them fields of fire to rake any attack up the valley. Holland Smith didn't fully recognize the severity of the opposition, and, by the end of the day, the 106th Infantry had gained little, while the 165th Infantry had been thrown back onto the original line of departure. Meanwhile, the 2nd Marine Division on the left was painfully slugging its way forward in the tortuous environs around Mount Ta Po Chau. The 4th Marine Division, on the right, pivoted east, driving fast into the Kagman Peninsula. There the ground was level, a plus, but covered with cane fields, a big minus, as the rifle companies well knew. A platoon leader remarked, "The terrain here consisted of countless cane fields, one after another, and it was the same old story. In every field the company would lose a man or two. It was wonderfully quieting to the nerves to start into a growth of head-high cane, and wonder who would not be coming out on the other side. The Jap snipers who were doing the damage were dug in so deeply and camouflaged so well that it was impossible to locate them before they fired. And then it was too late. You were right on top of them, and they had nailed another one of your men. Or maybe you. Then there was always that next cane field up ahead. Some of the fields had been burnt out by the napalm bombing of our planes. This gave us greatly increased observation as we went through them, but clouds of choking dust arose from the ashes to plague us and dirty our weapons. With water so scarce, one of our chief sources of liquid sustenance was sugarcane juice. We'd whack off a segment of the cane with our combat knives, then chew and suck on it till only the dry fibers were left. In these burnt-out fields we weren't even able to do this, as the cane was spoiled and tasted lousy. Along with the death toll in the cane fields came the physical demands placed on the troops by the hot tropical climate. Lieutenant Chapin noted small human issues that loomed large in the minds of the assault troops. All this time the sun was broiling down on top of us. Our canteens had been empty for hours. Everyone was absolutely parched. Finally, we did stop, as the effects of heat exhaustion and lack of water started to become apparent. Our company commander arranged for some water to be brought up to our position. When the cans arrived, everyone crowded thirstily around, and we had to order the men to disperse. Then each platoon leader rationed out a can of the precious liquid amongst his men. As was the age-old Marine tradition, we waited till all our men had their share before we took ours. The water was lukewarm, rusty, and oily as it came out of the cans, but it still tasted like nectar. While these local events transpired on the front lines, a major upheaval was taking place in the rear. Seeing that the corps line would be bent back some 1,500 yards in the zone of the 27th Infantry Division, Holland Smith had had enough. He went to see Admirals Spruance and Turner to obtain permission to relieve Ralph Smith of command of his division. After reviewing the Marine General's deeply felt criticism of the 27th Infantry Division's defective performance, the admirals agreed to the requested change, and Ralph Smith was superseded by Major General Jarman on 24th June. A furor arose with bitter inter-service recriminations, and the flames were fanned by lurid press reports. Holland Smith summarized his feelings 3 days after the relief. According to a unit history, the 27th Infantry Division in World War II, he stated, "The 27th Division won't fight, and Ralph Smith will not make them fight." Army generals were furious, and in Hawaii, Lieutenant General Robert Richardson, commander of the U.S. Army in the Pacific, USARPAC, convened an Army Board of Inquiry over the matter. The issue reached to the highest military levels in Washington. While the Army's Deputy Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Joseph T. McNarney, reviewed the matter, he found some faults with Holland Smith, but then went on to say that Ralph Smith failed to exact the performance expected from a well-trained division, as evidenced by poor leadership on the part of some regimental and battalion commanders, undue hesitancy to bypass snipers, with a tendency to alibi because of lack of reserves to mop up, poor march discipline, and lack of reconnaissance. The Army's official summary: United States Army in World War II, the War in the Pacific, Campaign in the Marianas, published 15 years after the operations, attributed some errors to Holland Smith's handling of a real problem. And it also gave full recognition to the difficult terrain and bitter resistance that the Army regiments faced. The history stated that, "There is no doubt that the 106th Infantry Regiment of the 27th Division was late in jumping off in the attack on the morning of 23rd June, even though not so late as Holland Smith charged. On the 23rd and again on the 24th, the Army troops attacking Death Valley were slow and faltering in their advance. According to the testimony of General Jarman, who took over the division from Ralph Smith, the unit leaders of the 106th Infantry were hesitant and apparently confused. Although the Army troops in Death Valley sustained fairly heavy casualties, the two Marine divisions on the flanks suffered greater ones. Yet the Marines made considerable advances while the 165th Infantry registered only small gains, the 106th Infantry almost none at all. No matter what the extenuating circumstances were, and there were several, the conclusion seems inescapable that Holland Smith had good reason to be disappointed with the performance of the 27th Infantry Division on the 2 days in question.